One of the biggest stories we have seen in years involves the child sex abuse scandal involving the Pennsylvania Catholic Church. More than 300 priests identified, abusing more than 1,000 victims dating back decades. As of now, though, there is a limit of when victims can press criminal charges or sue their abusers. Will that change when state lawmakers come back to Harrisburg this month? State Senator DiSanto of Dauphin and Perry County will help us answer some of those questions. But first, I want to ask you, you are halfway through your term, your first term in Harrisburg, your first term in the political field.
Yes.
What do you know now about the challenges of working in Harrisburg that you maybe weren't expecting when you were first elected?
Well, it's interesting. It's always easier to be critical from the outside looking in, but once you're in there, the one thing that I've come to understand is that each of the senators are elected by their constituents, and the state is very diverse, and each of the senators represent different interests, and many times the public thinks, oh, all we have to do is make the right decision and everybody get along, work together, advance legislation, but it's really quite important to build coalitions and represent all the people in the state.
The grand jury report on the child sex abuse within the Catholic Church, you yourself are Catholic. You've spoken out about this in the past. This hits home for you. Why is it that as of now there's no law in place or why is the current law, why hasn't it been changed yet to extend the limit of when abuse victims can criminally charge and sue their abusers?
Well, there is legislation out of the Senate, Senate Bill 261, that I voted for, that was passed over to the House, that eliminated the statute of limitations moving forward. It also made it easier to sue public institutions such as schools that have this, because although current legislation is targeted more towards the Catholic Church, I would support it broadened against everybody. Currently, that bill is sitting in the House. It's been there for over a year, so the House has to act on that bill, and that's what I'm sure will be happening this fall when we come back. There is an attempt to amend that bill to permit a 2-year look-back window, and the Senate bill did not support that because of the remedies clause in the Pennsylvania Constitution prohibits looking back at reviving expired claims.
So the unconstitutionality of it, just to butt in, is kind of what is at the question mark here.
Right.
And Senator Scarnati says it's unconstitutional because Bruce Castor said it was unconstitutional a couple years ago. And then when Bruce Beamer was Attorney General, he said it wasn't unconstitutional.
Right.
So where are we? Is this something that can be resolved to allow that?
I think we should look at this through a constitutional amendment, because if we pass legislation, which I believe is defective, and let the courts resolve it, which some proponents are saying, that in fact will just tie it up for years and do nothing but enrich lawyers. And I think the faster path would take 2 years, but it would actually do a constitutional amendment and look at that. Because I believe the victims do need some sort of justice. So
if the House sends it back to the Senate with that clause in there, because it's been voted through the House in the past with that clause, I think it was 180 to 12 when it happened a couple years ago, is that something that you would support?
I'm going to look at anything very thoughtfully and consider. I am not going to comment on what the House is going to do, because frankly, I am surprised and disappointed that it's been sitting over there for a year, and now hopefully it is addressed, but it's in a very emotional time, and I want to make sure whatever we do right, and it brings real justice to the victims. That's my concern, and I say that as a practicing, engaged Catholic.
Speaking of things that are kind of stuck in the House right now, your bill about a pension forfeiture if you're convicted of a crime or plead guilty, it unanimously passed out of the Senate earlier this year.
Yes.
How big of an issue is that in the first place, where people, public figures, are able to still receive their pensions after being convicted of a crime?
I think it's huge. You know, since 2005, PSERS and SERS have issued over 200 pension forfeiture letters. There's only 20 corruption crimes and 11 sex crimes that you can lose your pension for. It's in the millions of dollars that could potentially be brought back to the state. But you know, the higher point with me is that as a public official, I think we should be held to a higher standard. And my pension forfeiture bill that has really been in the works for a number of years, we're only half stuck in the House right now. We're in second consideration in the Appropriations Committee. I'm hoping that that's taken up in the next session, and the governor indicated he would sign that bill. So I think that's good bipartisan legislation.
And lastly, and these segments go by so quickly,
yes.
I want to talk to you about Act 47 real quick, because you do represent Harrisburg.
Absolutely.
What can be done? Can you do anything more? Can the city do more to speed up the process so that they don't go into a financial crisis?
Well, I work closely with Mayor Pappenfuss. The city obviously is in my district, and I don't think it does anybody any good to have the largest urban area in the district to be failing. I think the city's made great strides to try to address their issues. I think Representative Rothman has introduced some legislation that would be helpful. We're going to work through that. And I've been working closely with the city to try to be able to retain the existing taxing authority they have and let them progress out and move and get back on their own 2 feet.
We'll have everything that we just talked about on our website, fox43.com. Senator DiSanto's first time here on the Capitol Beat. We'll make sure we have you back.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
you.
much. We'll be right back.